She was only 16, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a young girl full of life, dreams, and innocence, gone in the most unthinkable way. On February 6, 2023, the remains of Susana Morales were discovered in the quiet woods of an Atlanta suburb. For months, her family had begged for answers, pleaded for help, and fought against indifference. They were told she had run away. They were told not to worry. But the reality was darker than anyone could have imagined. Susana had been failed by the very people sworn to protect her, and the prime suspect in her killing was not a faceless predator in the night. It was one of their own, a police officer. The story of Susana Morales is not just about one tragedy. It is about a system that repeatedly dismisses vulnerable voices, silences families, and covers for its own. It is about a family's grief turned into a movement, and a community demanding to know why another young life had to be stolen. July 26, 2022, should have been just another summer evening for Susana. She was on her way home, last seen walking, last heard from by her family, who knew her well enough to reject the idea that she would simply vanish by choice. But when her family reported her missing, Gwinnett County Police brushed their fears aside. They labeled her a runaway, reducing her disappearance to a stereotype they had heard countless times before. Her family insisted otherwise. They knew Susana. They knew her habits, her routines, her love for her family. They knew she would not abandon them, would not disappear into the night, but their pleas were ignored. Every hour lost was another hour Susana was in danger. Every dismissal pushed the truth further out of reach. Then came February. The discovery no family ever wants. Her remains lying in the woods. Evidence of betrayal, violence, and neglect. And then, a shocking revelation. The man connected to her death was Georgia officer Miles Bryant, a 22-year-old police officer who had once held the badge that symbolized trust and protection. Miles Bryant was no stranger to disturbing behavior. Behind the uniform, there were patterns: stalking, harassment, inappropriate actions toward women and girls. Red flags ignored until it was far too late. After his arrest, Bryant was fired from the Doraville Police Department. He now faces charges of felony murder, kidnapping, burglary, filing a false crime report, and concealing a death. Inside Gwinnett County's Adult Detention Center, he sits without bond. But the outrage isn't just about one man's crimes. It is about how long it took for the truth to come to light, how the Morales family's concerns were repeatedly dismissed, how the system protected its own, even while a young girl's life was at risk. Susana's sister, Jasmine, captured the heartbreak and disbelief that rippled through her family. "I was shocked. I had to process it for a second. I was just like, what?" That explains why it took so long for us to have an answer. It's a police officer. I'm guessing they know how to cover their tracks. The case of Susana Morales is not an isolated tragedy. It belongs to a wider, deeply disturbing pattern. According to Mapping Police Violence, at least 1,176 people were killed by law enforcement officers in the United States in 2022, the highest number in nearly a decade. And that violence doesn't stop with shootings. Between 2005 and 2013, a Bowling Green State University study found police officers were charged with rape over 400 times, a number experts believe is only the tip of the iceberg. In 2022, NBC News reviewed department rosters in New York, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia, and discovered that officers accused of sexual abuse and harassment often weren't fired or even disciplined. Some were promoted. This is the reality. The very individuals entrusted with authority and protection can, and often do, exploit it. And when the system designed to investigate them is the same system that shields them, accountability is rare. At the same time, the disappearance of young Black and Latina women has skyrocketed during the pandemic. In Washington, D.C., Dozens of unsolved missing cases involving black and brown girls under 21 remain unresolved. Activist Cheyenne put it bluntly, "Families like Susana's come to America for the very thing that we just can't seem to offer: peace and safety." For Susana's family, grief quickly turned into determination. They launched the Justice for Susana petition, demanding a fair and transparent investigation. They wanted more than words. They wanted action. They demanded that Miles Bryant be tried under the full extent of the law, that the officers who failed to act responsibly be held accountable, that Georgia's Title 35, the code misused to justify delays in reporting her disappearance, be reviewed and corrected. Protesters joined them, taking to the streets not just for Susana, but for all the voices silenced before her. In March, crowds demanded the halting of the $90 million Cop City Police Training Center, which activists said symbolized more oppression, more displacement, and more distrust. Their chants, "Stop Cop City" and "Viva Tortuguita," connected Susana's tragedy to a broader fight against police brutality, racial injustice, and systemic neglect. "No amount of money, no amount of justice can bring her back to us," Jasmine said, her voice steady even in grief. "But what we can do is to try and make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else again, and that's why we are here." Susana's case exposes the cracks in a system built on inequality. Time and again, Black and Latin families are forced to scream for attention, to beg for recognition, to fight for justice that should be automatic. Studies show that Latins are killed by police at nearly twice the rate of white Americans. The police violence report confirms that most unarmed victims are people of color, and that they are less likely to be threatening when killed. And still, when young women like Susana go missing, their cases are brushed aside, dismissed, or ignored. Many missing Latinas are statistically erased, categorized as white, masking the scope of this epidemic. It is a silence that dehumanizes, a neglect that costs lives. Susana Morales should have been safe. She should have been protected. Instead, she became the victim of a system that saw her life as disposable, her family's cries as noise, and her community's suffering as invisible. Her death is a tragedy, but it is also a warning. This is not just about one officer. It is not just about one department. It is about a culture of impunity, a fractured relationship between law enforcement and the communities they patrol, and a history of violence that continues to claim the most vulnerable among us. Susana's name joins too many others, names of young Black and brown, lives cut short, their stories often ignored until it is too late. But her family refuses to let her be forgotten. And in their fight, they remind us all that true justice is not only about punishment, but about prevention, protection, and reform. As Jasmine Morales said, "No amount of money, no amount of justice can bring her back to us. But what we can do is to try and make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else again, and that's why we are here." Susana Morales deserved safety. She deserved a future. She deserved to live. And until families like hers no longer have to fight to be heard, the question will always linger. When will justice finally mean protection for all?